Hello and welcome to another edition of Buckeye Banter, part of the Buckeye Huddle Network. I am Seth Shaner, and I'm so excited to welcome in former Ohio State All Big Ten linebacker Brian Rolle. Brian, thanks for taking some time.
Seth, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Well, hey, I like to tell folks stories who played for or worked around Ohio State athletics, and there's a soft spot in a lot of Buckeye fans' hearts for Brian Rolle. I can tell you that right now. I was going to ask you this before we went on the air, but I thought it'd be better if I just butchered it to start with. You were born in November 30th, 1988, but and tell me, Immokalee,
Immaculate. Yep, you got it right the first
Immokalee,
time.
Florida. All right, I got it. And you attended Immokalee High School, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Um, Wikipedia, which is obviously always right, correct? I mean,
Never
W-
wrong.
Wikipedia says that you are a distant cousin of Antero Roll, Samari Roll, and Myron Roll. Is all this right?
That is correct. And we've all, we're not like, first cousins where we see each other on a daily basis, but over the years we spent time together and it's been awesome to learn that. Actually, I didn't learn that until I was in college. So it's
Yeah.
been
Well,
awesome.
each one of those guys, along with yourself, brought a lot of memories on the football field. That's for sure.
Yes, sir.
Wikipedia also said that you're related to Chad Johnson. Is this one true?
So that one I read that I think in like Sports Illustrated in maybe 2010. I think is via marriage. I don't think we're
Okay.
blood cousins, but nonetheless we're family,
There you go.
and I accept it.
Well, with that out of the way, tell me a little bit about growing up in Florida and playing football. High school football in Florida is no joke, as everybody knows. So, tell me a little bit about playing there, and also just kind of growing up down there.
Yeah, South Florida is a grind, man. If there's a word that I can put to it, it's a grind. I grew up in a small town, and most people never heard of Immokalee until you mentioned the name Edrin James. Indianapolis coach, great running back, a Hall of Famer. But it was great, man. You just really learn how to work extremely hard, learn how to, as we say back at home, get it out of the mud, meaning get down and dirty to be the best you want to be, not just in sports, but just in life. Great family I grew up in. My brother played college football at Illinois State. So I had a great foundation for sports there. Great parents, great siblings. I'm the youngest of the boys, and I'm a twin. He's a minute older than me, so I had to be a little bit tougher than everybody else growing up as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, is it true you won a state championship in high school?
We did. My sophomore year, we won the only state championship in our high school's history.
That's awesome. Now you played fullback and linebacker there. Is that right?
Yeah, I played fullback linebacker. I played a little running back at the time, but I played with Javar James, who played at the University of Miami and with the coach for a couple of years. But I really made my hay at fullback and at linebacker.
Now, I mentioned to you before we hit record that I do a Reds show as well. I've done
Yep.
that show for a little over a year, but I've done this show for a couple months. And if I ever have a personal angle with a guest such as yourself, I bring it up. And while
Uh,
it's not, it's more like second degree here, but I've got it here. In 2006, my wife and I traveled to Boca Raton for her work training. She had made manager at Deloitte and Touche, and they flew her down there. And I said, hey, I don't go to Florida in December. Let's go.
yeah.
So I came down, and it was that weekend that Troy Smith won the Heisman. Okay,
Yeah.
so I assume you remember that time.
Yep.
Luke Fickle was on our airplane as we landed in Fort Lauderdale. And a day or two later, the local paper that I opened up says Brian Rolle has committed to Ohio State. And I'm like, I think I know where Luke Fickle was going.
you are absolutely correct. Um, I had come to the Michigan game, the 1 versus 2 game, and then Fickle visited me after that as well. And I remember telling my parents actually at the Michigan game. I remember after the game, I got to the hotel to Blackwell. I called my mom and said, "I'm coming to Ohio State." I didn't say it to anybody else. And this is after meeting guys like Jack Tatum and Mike Dawson, things like that. And then Fickle came down and kind of like just further affirmed why I should come to Ohio State. And the decision I had already made up in my head, watching them play Michigan a couple weeks prior.
When I opened that newspaper, I mean, you stayed in a hotel back then. You got a newspaper every day, and my wife was off at training, and I didn't have a whole lot to do. So I opened that newspaper at breakfast, and I thought, I know why Luke Fickle was on my plane now. That makes a lot of sense. What was it like? I mean, certainly Coach Fickle, he was in that program even I remember interviewing him from a newspaper story back in '03 about Will Smith and some of those guys. But what was it about him that made you want to play for him? Aside from the fact you had seen such that 1-versus-2 game probably sold the university pretty well, I would assume.
Yeah. So no knock on Fickle. So my recruiting coordinator was actually Tim Beckman. He
Oh
was
yeah.
actually the defensive backs coach. And coming out of high school, obviously, I'm gonna say undersized for a linebacker. I was kind of like, will I play, defensive back or linebacker? So Tim Beckman was my recruiting coordinator. And I think he had already made the decision to leave to go to Oklahoma State.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Fickle kind of stepped in as the, our territories recruiter.
Okay.
And lo and behold, he became my coach in college, position coach. And man, that dude just, you almost have to know him to understand him. And he cares so deeply. He's a different coach than Tressel in the way he approaches the game and how he coaches coaching. But awesome, awesome man. And to see him over the years grow since I left Ohio State to where he is today, awesome dude.
Well, then what about playing for Coach Tressel as well? I mean, I'm sure that had a lot to do with your decision-making process as well.
100%. And if you listen to every interview I've ever done, one thing I always say is when Tressel came to my home, he sat and talked to my parents. He told my mom and my dad, I don't care, about the football aspect of it because he wouldn't be in my house if I wasn't a good football player. But he's more interested in me as a person and how to develop me as a man as when I get to college, being away from home. And he did just that, hearing those words and through the recruiting trail, you hear coaches tell you they're going to get you to the NFL. They're going to make you the best player. Tressel and the entire staff that I had a chance to talk with, all they focused on was the person and how they can make you a better, person because they knew you had the attributes and the tools to be the great, athlete.
That's awesome. Now, I found a quote from the media guy. I believe it was right around the time you got to school. It says you chose to be a Buckeye because this is where men are made.
Well, 100%, 100%, and that's again that goes back to what Tressel and the coaches at the time preached. And I would honestly say, and I can honestly say that if I had to go back and do it again, I would have made that decision to come to Ohio State sooner, knowing what I know now and becoming the person I've become today.
Now, certainly you came to the Michigan game, the Ohio State team up north, I guess we would say. You came to that game, so that was a chilly day. What was it like for you to transition from South Florida to Columbus, Ohio?
Yeah, honestly, I don't remember being cold. That's the crazy thing. The atmosphere was just so electric to where nothing else really like the weather is an external factor to that game. It's like being around, like in the Blackwell, walking around so many great players that come back for the game and being in the stadium. I didn't realize it got cold here until the spring of when I got here, honestly. It was a rude awakening. I had to buy, obviously, jeans and jackets and things like that. But that only made me love Ohio even more to truly understand, the weather and the sports.
Sure, absolutely. Now, you played as a true freshman. You were special teams player of the week against Northwestern. That was a great win. I was actually at that game, and you guys really put it on those Wildcats that day.
Yeah, that was a game that I will probably never forget as long as God keep my memory right. I think actually I remember that game. Jamario O'Neal knocked a guy out.
Yeah.
I want to say on punt. And I always show that video to friends sometimes when they talk about football. Like you want to see a guy get hit, and that game was full of big hits and big plays.
I have a friend whose brother played at Ohio State, so we were in a section of, I guess, where the former players get to buy some tickets and things like that. Down there by the tunnel, right where the team comes in and out. And I had a camera with me, and I took a lot of pictures of the game. Ray Small had a punt return in that game. I have a picture of Cameron Hayward about to lay out a guy, like the quarterback for Northwestern. That was a memorable day.
Oh yeah, definitely. That was I think the game that kind of make me realize that hey, this is where I belong. You know what I mean? And on the field, not just a part of the program.
What did you do? Do you remember what you did to earn Special Teams Player of the Week as a freshman?
I think I had a couple tackles on kickoff, and then a big block actually on Ray Small's return.
Yeah.
I don't want to say the guy's name, but the guy from Northwestern who I, sprung the block on, to get Ray Small a touchdown. That sticks in my head a lot because that was probably the biggest hit I think I gave in college, to tell you the truth, and he ended up coming out of the game.
I got to tell you, again, a little bit of a personal anecdote. A relative of mine got married that day.
Wow.
But
Okay.
I had a ticket to the game. So I went to the Ohio State game.
I don't blame you. Listen, I, I got married, and this is a little off subject, but I got married in December 6th, 2014, doing our Big Ten championship against Wisconsin, and we perfectly timed our reception around the game. So I can definitely understand that.
I went to a wedding that year because if you remember right, they moved the Virginia Tech game. It was supposed to be on a different
Yeah.
week. The week that they played that game was supposed to be a bye week, and my wife accepted an invitation to go to a wedding here in Columbus, and
How
we're at
dare her?
the country club while the game's going on, and we were led to believe there would be a TV at the bar, but they wouldn't let non-members at the bar.
Oh
So
wow.
I did not see the game until I got at home and watched on DVR, and I was obviously not happy about that one. Um, there was another fall wedding. I got my wife got an invitation. My name is Seth Shaner, and the invitation said Mr. and Mrs. Sean Shaner on the invitation. So I told my wife, I said, "You and Sean have a good time. I'm going to."
Yeah, they didn't invite me, so I got somewhere to be. I understand that.
That's right. That's right. Hey, while you were there early on, you played behind current Notre Dame coach Marcus Freeman. Just obviously, we're learning more and more about him, or the whole country is really. Tell me a little bit about being a teammate of his and kind of having him kind of be ahead of you in class.
The dude was a class act, and along with James Laurinaitis, those are guys that really showed us, what it meant to be Ohio State Buckeyes and be linebackers and be part of something special. Marcus Freeman, I played behind him at will linebacker. The dude's work ethic was just, second to none. How we approach the game, how you approach practice, how you approach going to class. Those are all things that, I just sat back and watched as a freshman and all that he approached it like a business. And there's no surprise that he's successful today. He came back my senior year and was a grad assistant. And he worked just as hard at being a grad assistant as he did as a player. So I'm not surprised to see his career kind of accelerated, to where he is today at Notre Dame, and he's going to have a fantastic team.
Well, he's done a great job. Obviously, he's 0-3 against his alma mater, and we'd like to keep it that way. But obviously, he's done great things. Now, your second year, 2008, saw the arrival of Terrell Pryor. Um, Now, social media then was not what it is now,
Right.
but that was a media circus from day one, wasn't it? I mean, that was an interesting recruitment, and then his arrival.
Oh, it was the buzz, man. So I wasn't there with Troy Smith, and I'm sure like those guys had like notoriety unlike any other. But just the atmosphere shift when Terrell was being recruited, and then when he came, it changed, and obviously for the better. He was a great player for Ohio State, did some tremendous things. He was a great young man. Obviously towards the end of his career, things didn't pan out the way we all wanted. But he's still a brother of ours.
Mhm.
Had a tremendous career at Ohio State.
Brought a lot of memories to a lot of fans, that's for sure. Now, listen, you started at middle linebacker in 09 and 10, right? So you
Yep.
finally you get to be a starter, and you're at middle linebacker. And you mentioned earlier in the chat here that you came to school with the size being a question mark, maybe. So you
Right.
brought it up. You're listed at 5'11". Now, I mean, to be fair with you, like especially I'm a little older than you. I graduated Ohio State in 2001, so
Okay.
I was in my 20s when you were here in school. To folks my age and around, that 10 or so years from the time I was born, the prototypical linebacker at middle linebacker at that time was Andy Katzenmoyer.
Oh
And,
yeah, yeah, monsters.
6'4", 250.
Yeah.
um, so what? I mean, I guess you probably heard it your whole life. Hey, he's undersized. I mean, take me through kind of the dynamic of becoming Ohio State, and you had 94 tackles there as a junior. I mean, take me through all that and kind of what all went into it.
Yeah, what's funny is this. I never thought I was undersized.
Yeah.
You see a guy like the first time I saw James Laurinaitis and Marcus Freeman. I mean, they were bigger, but I didn't think I was undersized. I thought they were just big. You know
They're
what I
just
mean? And that goes back to where I come from.
Mhm.
We don't. I never saw stature in players I played against because the smaller someone is, they pack big punches, and that's something I prided myself on. And I was always bigger in high school, so when I got to Ohio State to see guys bigger than me, I'm like, wow, they're big, but
Mhm.
it is what it is.
Sure.
But to come to start a middle linebacker, that was a shock to a lot of people. It wasn't to me because I knew I had worked hard for it. And I remember Fickle telling me after learning I was going to be a starting linebacker, I thought I had to beef up and get to 240 or what have you. He just said, don't sacrifice your speed for size.
Mhm.
And I played at 220, 215, 220. But I ran fast and I hit hard, and that's all that really mattered at the end of the day.
What about that season, that '09 season? Terrell had started after obviously the USC lost in '08, and you played in '08. You played the Fiesta Bowl, I believe, against Texas, and then
Yep.
in '09 it becomes, hey, you go back to the Rose Bowl for the first time in over a decade. Take me a little bit through that season. I saw an interview you did where you did mention the Rose Bowl as one of the highlights of your career, but if you could tell me a little bit about that '09 season and kind of what that was like as you went along throughout the year.
Yeah, it was just something magical about that team. Obviously, you strive to play in a national championship and to win a national championship, and it didn't pan out. But through the season, you saw guys fought hard. I feel like you had like guys like Cameron Hayward who had played early on, and he had to kind of gel with some of us guys who had to start a little bit later in our careers. But we figured it out. And to be honest with you, that Rose Bowl opportunity, it felt like the national championship because as a kid, you watch guys like Reggie Bush and Vince Young and those guys playing that game, and to be blessed enough to be a part of the Ohio State team that played in that game and actually win was the highlight of my life, not just my career.
Yeah, I mean, and it's such, obviously it was such a good win to beat Oregon. It was interesting because I remember as I look back on it, when Ohio State played Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl after the '05 season, all the media coverage, I can still remember Brent Musburger talking about the genius Charlie Weiss, right?
Yep.
And then
Yep.
Jim Tressel comes in and beats them. And then against Oregon in '09, all you heard about was the Oregon, how different they did things and all this stuff. And lo and behold, Brandon Sane had a great game early, and then just some great things. You had the big catch over the middle as the sun's setting. It was a very memorable game, wasn't it?
I just got chills when you said that because I like you as an athlete, former player, regardless of what sport, you have visions of different points in your career and events. In that game, I remember the catch that DeVere Posey made over his shoulder.
Oh yeah, yeah.
We had missed the throw, I think maybe the down before, maybe a couple plays before. Then Terrell made the throw again. Again, I replay the stuff in my head all the time. And that big catch by Jake Ballard with the sun setting, the hills in the background, it was just the picturesque moment that captivated a great season.
I was looking over some of the things from that year specifically, and it's interesting because now the fun thing is now at your size, linebackers are closer to that size a lot of times because they need more speed, right? And
Yeah.
I've thought about it a few times where a guy the size of Andy Katzenmoyer might be pushed up to the line, right?
Yeah, he would struggle. He would be a defensive end at this point.
But the interesting thing about that defense that year is you had Jamaril Hines playing kind of that hybrid safety, and I know Jamario O'Neal maybe filled that role sometimes before, but you only really started two linebackers in that Rose Bowl, and Hines was kind of like going back and forth. What was that like to see the defense evolve even back then?
Well, that just shows the creativity with the coaches. Jamel Hines came in as a linebacker with myself out of Glenville.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say there might have been some injuries or what have you that forced him to kind of go back and play some safety, of which he played some in high school. But that nickel package that we had, or 30 package we called it, was just unique because we had a chance to get more athletes on the field. Jamel being a bigger body. And then if you remember Thaddeus Gibson, who was a bigger body as well, had an opportunity to be on the field more. Jim Haycock at the time did a great job of the schemes that he put together to where it seemed like more of a base defense for us than a traditional 4-3 that we had run the previous seasons.
Right. I mean, it's like, every Ohio State team I've ever known was technically a four lineman set with what used to be three linebackers for sure. But obviously we've seen that go out the window these last several years, even in the NFL. It is interesting though to look back. It really struck me today when I was looking at that roster and the starters in that game. I was like, wait a minute, that's right. It's
I think we were getting up for the future. We had guys that could run and not bigger body guys. Ross Holman wasn't a little guy; he wasn't the biggest guy.
Yeah.
But overall, we were, I'm gonna say, an average size defense. I just think we played so well together, and that's something that we knew we had to do in order to be successful. And it played out perfect against Oregon. A speedy team, a team that was favored to win, and we stuck to what we did best and ended up winning the game.
Well, there's a lot of pride also in the fact that game and then the 2014 national championship game and then this year at the Rose Bowl, Ohio State was able to kind of throttle down the Ohio State defense was able to really put into check. I mean, I remember the offense did it too, because even those defenders for Oregon back in 2014 were sucking wind, because
Yeah,
of the way
yeah.
Ohio State was running on them and things like that. It's really cool to see, the program that Ohio State is, step up big in those games.
Oh, 100%. And it takes a different type of pride to step up um, when you know the world is watching,
Mm.
or when you may not think, and when your back's against the wall. And I think in those big moments, we've shown up the best. And again, it's taking pride in the program, taking pride in your brotherhood that we've built over the years and the guys before us have built as well.
There's really something to that, I think. Now, 2010, you kind of mentioned a little bit with Terrell. Obviously, it doesn't end the way any of us would like if we're Ohio State fans. Um, but that season did end in a Sugar Bowl win against an SEC team. You beat Arkansas, and old foe Ryan Mallett was the quarterback. I remember. That would be Jim Tressel's last season as coach, and obviously we didn't know that at the time. Can you take me through your senior year? Let's forget about the turmoil at the end for a minute and start at the beginning and know you're going to be a senior starting middle linebacker. Take me through the season as a whole.
Oh yeah, we started our season off obviously on a fast note. We played pretty well. The game that stuck out in my head was the Wisconsin game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And our team that year, I feel like, you hear about like the great Alabamas, the great Georgias. I feel like we're one of the most talented teams. And I think maybe we had some complacency there with all the guys coming back from the year before. Um, but we rallied around the troops and knowing that we had an opportunity to play against an SEC team.
Mm-hmm.
With all the talk during that time about how great the SEC was and Arkansas deserved the chance to play for a national championship, and we were kind of like just there or had just made it. I remember bowl practice being like, you can drop a pin out and hear it because the guys were just so focused on
Yeah.
taking care of business, getting the job done. And I tell people that's one of two games I actually cried after just because of the emotions built up before the game and all the doubters talking about, what we couldn't do and that we didn't belong. And we went out and proved them wrong.
You did. And the other thing, you talk about focus. Unfortunately, a lot of the news had already come out, right? I remember
Right.
they made a big deal. I think there was even a big banner outside the Superdome with Terrell's picture on it. And it was like, well, no, they're going to have to be suspended. And then it was like, no, they're going to play. And I mean,
Yeah.
for you guys to maintain that focus, to me, said a lot about the core of your group. I mean, talked about that a little bit for me.
Yeah, that was tough, man. I'll tell you. And I was talking about this with some guys maybe a week or so ago. That even outside of our hotel, people they're going to try to get in your head, and it was more so Arkansas fans and people who had no allegiance either way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you heard the chirping, and then when that news came out, the coaches did a great job of having a conversation with the team. And again, we're all brothers at the end of the day, and we know that those guys that were a part of that incident, there was nothing malicious behind what they did. There was no, they were just doing what they thought was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we all rallied around them. And like I said, to this day, those are our brothers. We fought, bled, and cried together. But it took, our senior guys to keep the teams focused where it needed to be in order to get to that game and be successful. And we did just that.
Well, and certainly later on is when it really mushroomed and it got bigger and bigger. And
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously, as a result, Coach Tressel wasn't the coach anymore come Memorial Day weekend. But at that point, certainly it felt good to win that game. And I remember you guys had to hang on to it a little bit right at the end.
Yeah.
That was some nerve-wracking times as that game was closing down.
It was, and I tell people, even that game could have went so many different ways. The first or second play of the game, if you go back and watch it, they had a slant that they would have scored on. We blitzed the first three plays of the game. I want to say first 2 or 3 plays of the game. It could have went a very different way early, but they missed that pass, and I feel like momentum was on our side. They got frustrated, and then obviously at the end of the game, I still remember the defensive play that we called when Solomon Thomas got the interception,
Right.
and really sealed the game. It just felt so surreal. Like it felt more surreal winning that game than the Rose Bowl, just because of everything that was happening around the program.
Yeah. Well, speaking of yourself being maybe a little undersized, Dane Sanzenbacher was really big in that game as well. That
Yeah,
he had quite the career.
I think Dane is probably one of the most underrated players to play at Ohio State, not just receivers. The
I need
guy
to
was
get him on
awesome.
here. Yeah, I need to get a hold of him.
Yeah, his route running was just the guy was just on another level. same thing with preparation. How he conducted himself. He was a great teammate to play with.
Well, so you were drafted in the 6th round in the 2011 draft by the Eagles.
Correct.
What was that transition like, and how did it compare to maybe from high school to college? Is it anywhere the same, or was it similar?
Yeah, I would say for playing at Ohio State and you go into the NFL, the transition isn't that hard, isn't that
Mhm.
big of a jump. The biggest thing you hear about is speed. The NFL is faster. I tell people if you run a 4.5, you just have to run a 4.5 every play in the NFL. Whereas in college, you play a team that may be a lesser talent, you may not have to exert as much energy to be better. That would be the biggest thing, and that it's a business. It's a real business. As much as college you try to treat as a business, the NFL really is a job. You go to work every day, you're not punching the clock, but someone's there every day to take your job, and you have to prove that you belong. That's the biggest difference. But
Yeah.
it was an awesome experience. Very,
So
very
you were
awesome
there 2
experience.
years, is that right?
Correct.
And then I guess the way I read it, you were on a practice squad. Was it Pittsburgh?
Yeah, with Pittsburgh in 2012. I feel like the further away I get, the harder it is to remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, after that, I spent some time in Pittsburgh as well.
And then 1 year in Toronto, is that right?
With the
What was that
Boatmen,
like?
yes, sir.
Canadian football.
Canadian football, I tell people, is like high school. It's in the regard that you just have fun. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, you're not going there to be, a gazillionaire, and you're going for the love of the game. In my opinion,
Mhm.
I had so much fun and was so appreciative of Scott Milanovic and Jim Barker giving me the opportunity to play there. Met some great players, some lifelong friends playing in Canada, and had some fun times.
Well, hey, I like to end these interviews talking about some of your teammates. Like when I talk with guys, you already mentioned Dane Senzenbacher. That made me want to talk to you a little bit about two different things. So first off, who are some guys you were close to, maybe from day one, friends, that kind of thing? Who'd you hang out with a lot?
My best friend, his name is Barry Jackson. He went to school in Hilliard, Ohio.
Okay.
We are, when I say best friends, like we're going to actually, his wife's birthday next weekend. We'll be in Columbus. We'll go to the
All right.
spring game and go to dinner with him. We hang out. I feel like last weekend we were together. That's my brother, man. Um, Andre Amos, he played cornerback. He's out of
Yeah.
Middletown, Ohio. He took me in from day one. I remember coming up, kind of lost and trying to feel my way around Columbus. He took me under his wing, and almost 18 years later now, he's my brother. We were together last week as well for a party for my wife's birthday. So those two guys I would probably say I'm the closest with. But all the guys we get together. Connor Smith called me last week. He lives here in Cincinnati, in the Coleraine area. And we all stay in contact, but I would say those two guys are probably the two, Andre Amos and Barry Jackson, who we're together every other week, it seems like.
Now, maybe take this from when you were younger versus also when you were more of a veteran. You already mentioned kind of how underrated you thought Dane was as a receiver and as a player overall. Can you tell me some more Ohio State guys that you played with that were like just really something to watch, that you could watch on the field, even in practice, and be like, wow, this guy is really special?
Well, this won't be a surprise. Cameron Hayward. I mean,
Hmm.
the guy is still playing at a high level after so much time playing in the NFL. Todd Dellinger, a little bit older than I was, but played on the defensive line. Dexter Larimore.
Hmm.
Um, I think the big guys were, as a group, probably unsung heroes that kept us clean to be able to run and do what we do best. Those big men up front. I would say Dexter Larimore, Todd Dellinger were two guys that, for big men, they played so well. They were awesome. Doug Worthington.
Hmm.
If you ever met Doug, the guy's like a mountain,
Yeah.
a big man. Awesome guys. I would say I'll put those three guys in that, unsung heroes, guys that should be, talked about more when we talk about some of the great defensive linemen that play at Ohio State.
That's awesome. And the idea between the linebackers and the linemen, when things maybe aren't going well, maybe it's a coach even would say something about, well, these guys aren't doing their job, so it's making it harder for these guys, or vice versa. As a linebacker, for you to bring those guys up, I appreciate that, because that means that you kind of knew what they were kind of eating up some guys so you could make a play, right?
Oh, 100%. And Fickle made a point to point out when you make a play, a big tackle, a big hit or something, he goes to the D line because those guys have had to do something right. And
Mhm.
it happened a lot where they did something right for you to do your job right. And that just shows the camaraderie that we had as a team. That if you do your 111th, D line doing their job, LBs doing their job, safeties and corners, you're going to make the plays. And those are the guys where it starts at in the trenches.
What about offensive players? Maybe you went against in practice, or maybe even when you were younger and you were maybe on scout team or something like that. Who were some of those?
Alex Boone.
Yeah.
That dude, man. And the thing about it, I was a little cocky as a freshman. You come in, you're highly rated. You're on scout team, so you try to, the get over on the guys, if you will. And man, that dude was, he was so tough to go against. And I wasn't a defensive lineman, but I tried to rush the passer in practice. The guy was awesome, and no surprise he was successful in the NFL. Jake Ballard, obviously tight end, was really, 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 really good.
Mm-hmm.
And Todd Beckman doesn't get a lot of credit.
Yeah.
I think Todd was an excellent quarterback. And maybe I was young and didn't know much and didn't know better, but I thought Todd was a really, really great quarterback. And then Robbie Showinoff, if you remember, quarterback behind
he was
Todd.
tall, right? Really tall.
He was really tall, athletic. Didn't get a lot of time because of, the guys he had in front of him. But, watching the guy in practice, how he played, it made me think, well, how can this guy not play as good as he is? But then you look at the career that Todd Beckman had before Terrell got there and then how successful Terrell was, you can understand.
Well, take me through that a little bit, because then you saw all 3 years of Terrell Pryor. He arrived, and was it mostly just pure athleticism when he was real young, and then he got a little more in tune with understanding things as he went along, I assume. But take me through that. What was it like to see him just as a pure athlete, and then where did you see improvement and things like that?
Yeah, you definitely saw, we heard so much about how fast this kid was, and
Mm-hmm.
he's tall and he could run, and you saw it every day. And obviously, as you're learning, you're thinking a lot. So he did a lot of running because he couldn't process the game as a Todd Beckman could at the time. And then you saw as the years progressed, he got better. And where everyone's eyes were opened, fans, us alike, was that Rose Bowl game where in practice there was a different intensity about him. There was a different, poise about him. And then he went in the game and had, I think it was like 19 for 26 and 270 yards or something.
Mm-hmm.
Just awesome. He did everything right, it seemed like.
Did.
And that's where I would say the practice is where we start to see Terrell turn the corner, more so than in the game, because the game is just, just the fruit of whatever it is you're doing that week. And he showed a tremendous amount of growth just in that practice getting up to that game. And it was just awesome to see.
That's sometimes cool to see in college back then, especially when there was all that time between the game and then the bowl game. I mean, you've got to, like, to me, that's just like practice, right? I mean, it's all that work you guys put in. If it's done right, then certainly that's good. Funny as a fan and more of I love football, but I certainly didn't play it at the level you did. To think of guys like Terrell, and I think of him gliding to the sideline. Like he would just get to that stick and turn the corner, right? And then Braxton Miller comes in, and Braxton Miller is more like a running back. He's running in between the tackles more and things like that.
Yeah.
You end up with JT Barrett, and JT Barrett's not. He's kind of a mix of both
in between, correct?
Because he's on the read option more, and he's getting around the corner, but not going all the way. It's amazing to see the differences of those three guys almost in succession that played for Ohio State at that position. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and there are very few players, speaking of Terrell, that I could not run and catch. Terrell Pryor being one of them, and Michael Vick being number two.
Okay.
And I remember, going to like when I played in Philadelphia, one of the first practices I had, and it was tag off the quarterback, and me not being able to catch Michael Vick from behind, I thought to myself, man, like Terrell's the only other guy that ever ran away from me, and I couldn't get close to. And like you said, the guy just glides, and it was just like it was majestic almost to watch.
It was, because he's so tall and his legs are so long, and yet there was no like the hitch and the giddy up that people talk about, right? It was just, and that's amazing. And so, and a guy like yourself, I'm sure. I mean, I remember even when Troy Polamalu played for the Steelers, and he chased down. I forget what the play was, but it was against my Bengals. I'm a Bengals fan, and I remember because Carson Palmer and he were college teammates.
Yep.
And he made this beeline on this play, and they actually timed it, and he's full pads and a helmet, and he ran like a 4.19 or a 4.2, like in game play. So a lot of you guys, I'm sure, when the game was on and the finger snapped or the snap went, you were just in that mode, right? I mean, you just took off.
Oh, 100%. And like I said, you got to run with your 4-4, 4-5 every play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at Ohio State, and you watch the way we play even today, those guys do that every day. Our coaches coach that every day. And you can tell when watching our team this past year going on that 4-game run,
Mm-hmm.
they played that type of football every play. And that's the reason why they won national championships. When you look back then for us, we were successful because that's the type of play that was expected.
Well, hey, I'll get you out on this. You're living in the Cincinnati area, so you're still here in Ohio.
Yep.
What's it been like, especially like that 4-game run, as a former player? What's it like to kind of see the guys do what they did this year?
I tell you what, when I tell you I am still I'm on cloud 10 right now. Just all the work those guys put in. Obviously, been on the outside in, looking at, all the hate that the coaches got and the players got after that Michigan game. To see them like hoist that trophy at the end of the season, yeah, you still have that Michigan game in the back of your head, but you know what? They did what everyone sought to do. Everyone doesn't seek to beat Michigan. Everyone seeks to win a national championship. We want to beat Michigan, but they kept their eyes on the prize, and they stuck around and rallied around each other, and did the ultimate and did something that since 2014 no one else has done, which is awesome. And I have nothing but respect for the players, especially for Ryan Day. I golfed with him a couple years ago, and I told him my son will play for him if he ends up staying at Ohio State for another 15 years.
There you go.
So,
That'll be great. Yeah, I mean it's so amazing, and the game happened. It is what it is. I mean, you've got 4 pairs of gold pants, right? So like,
yes, sir.
you haven't experienced what that group of seniors have done. Had to go through, and so for them to pick themselves back up and do what they did, I think Ryan Day said it best. He said the story can be told once we win. He said that before the national title game, and now the story's being told, and it's just really amazing.
Oh, 100%. I think, again, you're going to look back in 20, 30, 40 years from now, and they lost to Michigan, and their butt is going to be a good butt.
Mm-hmm.
But they went on a 4-game win, the greatest 4-game win, arguably in the history of college football, and brought home the trophy.
Well, I bet you would have liked to have been able to play into a bit of a bigger playoff, right, than the 2-team BCS back then. Who knows what might have happened in 2009 or even 10.
Yeah,
but hey,
definitely.
Brian Rolle, thanks so much for taking some time tonight. I really appreciate it, and it's been a real pleasure to get to know you a little bit.
I appreciate the time, and thanks for having me as well, and go Bucks.
Hey, go Bucks, and thanks for tuning in to Buckeye Banter on the Buckeye Huddle Network. Check us out on YouTube. Give us a like, follow us, and on your favorite audio podcast platform as well. If it's Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating and a review. So long, everybody.